Good evening and welcome to the FMEA webinar for high school students. I think I want to major in music. Now what? Tonight's webinar is part of a series of webinars intended for high school students that we're going to be having once a month throughout the year. We'll tell you a few more people or a few more of the sessions at the end tonight that you can look forward to. Our presenter tonight, Dr. Robert Clark, is one of the professors of music education at Vanderbilt University. And we also have Dr. Stephen Kelly, who's professor of music education at Florida State University with us tonight. And he is also the president of the Florida Music Education Association. And before we get started, I know he'd like to welcome you and say a few words. Dr. Kelly.
Thank you, Dr. Antman. And I want to welcome Dr. Clark. He teaches at Vanderbilt, but he is a graduate of Florida State University and taught in schools, Florida schools. Was a middle school and high school band director while he was here in Florida. So he has a lot of experience with this. Florida Music Education Association is really very pleased to offer this series free to our high school students, not only just in Florida, but I know we have students that are coming in to us this afternoon from across the country that have heard about this and want to find out more about what it's like to be a music major and ultimately perhaps even become a music teacher. I have been teaching now for 35 years, and I started in the public schools in Roanoke, Virginia. I've taught in Kansas and out in Nebraska and North Carolina, and now here in Florida. It is a challenging profession, but I will tell you, I cannot think of something that is more meaningful, more impactful than being a teacher. And if it's something that you're interested in, then this series is for you to try to find out more about what it's like and the preparation that goes into this incredibly noble and impactful profession. I want to thank Dr. Antman and his Student Development Committee as a part of Florida Music Education Association for putting this together. It is kind of an extension of our January conference that's going to be virtual this year. And even though we can't be face-to-face, we are offering quite the all-state experience for our Florida musicians, as well as for our teachers. And I hope that everybody will be able to join us in January and throughout the series. So without me talking anymore, you came here to listen to Dr. Clark. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Antman and welcome everybody to this incredible series. Thank you.
Now, just again, before we get started, this is part of a series. We're going to have four other sessions like this, one a month through March, where you can learn about careers in music, how to be a music major, what it's like to be a music major. Our December session is going to feature current college music students talking to you about things that you need to know from their point of view. And tonight's presentation is for people who are interested in majoring in music, all sorts of different fields. Dr. Clark, I've known for years. I could not think of a better person to present this session to you tonight. As we're going, just a couple of ground rules. We are in a webinar mode, so you won't be able to unmute and talk. If you have questions, I'll be monitoring the chat and the Q&A throughout the evening, relaying questions to Dr. Clark, and Dr. Clark can answer all kinds of questions. Tonight's session is about music, but I'm sure if you have life questions, he's here for you. And without any further ado, we're going to hand it over to Dr. Clark, and we hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Dr. Antman. Everyone, I'm excited to be here, and I just want to start by thanking you. Thanks for showing up here on a night that you don't have to do anything. You didn't have to, you're outside of school hours. A lot of you might be on Thanksgiving break, and I just want to thank you for being here and maybe trying to learn some more about this really wonderful career, which is music. And some of you are maybe really committed to going to college in music. Maybe some of you are just testing the waters, thinking about it. There's going to be something for all of you here tonight. I'm really excited to answer all your questions that I can. And I'm going to ask you maybe to answer some things in the chat at some point. So make sure your fingers stay warmed up and ready to go on that. And in the end, I'm going to have some time, hopefully, for some questions. So please do, whatever questions you have, be ready to type those in. I'll answer as many as I can. And I'm also going to give you my email address at the end where you can get a hold of me, and I'm happy to answer your questions that you want to ask outside of this time as well. As Dr. Antman said, and Dr. Kelly, both two of my favorite people in this world from my days at FSU, I teach, my name is Robert Clark, and I teach instrumental music education at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. And that means that I teach people who want to be teachers. I'll tell you, I've spent a lot of my life in school, not just as a student, but as a teacher. And I feel like I'm a good person to have this conversation with you. And here's why. This is why. This is me. And this is me when I was a senior in high school, actually right before I became a senior in high school. And I will tell you, first of all, I made some unfortunate choices when it comes to hair. That's hair brought to you by the 90s right there. But there's some other things you need to know about this person right here, me, when I was your age. I really had this idea that I wanted to major in music. I also really had this idea that maybe even before that I wanted to go to college. You see, I grew up in a place where not a lot of people went to college, maybe except my teachers. No one in my family went to college. This was not something that was expected maybe of me, but in the early 90s, Georgia started the lottery. The state of Georgia did. I grew up in Georgia. The lottery started, and our governor, Zell Miller, he said this lottery is going to support this thing called the Hope Scholarship. And the Hope Scholarship was supposed to make tuition free for anyone who wanted to go to school in the state of Georgia, as long as you had a 3.0 GPA. So when I was in about 6th grade or so, 7th grade, posters started going up all over my middle school. And they were about college. When you go to college, they didn't say if you go to college or do you want to go to college. It was almost like it wasn't a choice. When you go to college, right? So keep your grades up for when you go to college. It was that sort of kind of propaganda. And I just started to believe that I probably should go to college. And then I loved band. I had a great experience in middle and high school band. And I decided that maybe I wanted to be a teacher. And maybe I did want to major in music. But I'll tell you, beyond that, the person in this picture didn't know anything else. I didn't understand how to get into college. I didn't really know what I needed to do, kind of the mechanics of getting there. And so that's what I want to share with you tonight. When I took this picture, I had no idea what I was going to be doing in 1 year. This picture was probably in August. So 1 year later, I had no clue what was going to be happening in my life. So that's kind of the stuff that I hope to be able to share with you a bit tonight. You know, with COVID, I've been able to meet with a lot of high school groups. I met with Dr. Antman's groups at Freedom High School and at least 10 others in the state of Florida just in the past 6 weeks or so, and then others in other states, local schools up here in Tennessee. And I find that our students are very resilient, and that you all understand that COVID is temporary and you're looking at life after COVID. And I just want to encourage you to, while this is very important and while we have to take care of ourselves and be healthy and get out of this, I want to encourage you to not lose your focus on the life that comes after this, not give up. And I'm very encouraged by the students that I've seen. So take one more look at this hair. This hopefully will not come back, this style. All right. And I'm going to move on. You will get a chance to see this later, but I want to move on for now and talk about maybe why you're here. All right. So some of you are here because you are absolutely convinced that you want to major in music. That was me. I was convinced. I had no idea how it was going to happen, what in the world I needed to do to make it happen, but I was convinced that I needed to major in music. So if you're convinced you want to major in music, I'm glad you're here. Some of you are really skeptical. Like you might be like a 50-50 kind of person where you think it might be something you want to do. Maybe you want to be a teacher. You're not sure if you want to be a music teacher. Maybe you just think that you want to maybe be a performance major. You love to sing, but you don't know what to do with it, right? So maybe you're here for more information. Some of you might just totally be at the inquiring stage. I have no clue what I want to do. That's also fine. By the way, you don't have to know everything you're going to do in your life by the time you're 18. If somebody's telling you that, you need to plug your ears when you're around them. All right. And then some of you are just here because, you know, choir, orchestra, and band is just really fun. And you're thinking that you may want to do that. And maybe in a lot of ways, maybe that's where I was even more than the convinced. Maybe I just thought it was really fun and I just kind of wanted to do it forever. I was the kind of person that loved school. I don't know about you, but I loved going to school and I just wanted to do that for my whole life. And so that's why I decided to be a teacher. But maybe you are feeling that way about your choir, band, and orchestra, and it's just so much fun. You just want to do it all the time. Now, here's what I want to ask you. Why are you here? So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. Go ahead and warm those fingers up so you can type and tell me in the chat really quickly, which person are you? Are you convinced that you want to major in music? Are you skeptical? Are you just barely sticking your toe in the water trying to find some information? Are you here because it's just super fun for you and that's why you're here? Where do you think? We got all the chat is growing here. Okay. we got some people that are telling me exactly what they want to do. I want to major in film, in composition, and do film scoring. That's fantastic. Look at you all go. Thank you all for your input. I'm seeing a lot of convinced and a lot of skeptical people. That's great. I just saw somebody convinced for music education. I love that. I see some people talking about wanting to minor in music. Fantastic. Please hold on to any questions you have about minoring. I'm going to talk about that a little bit, but if I don't talk about it enough, I want you to ask me questions about it. Fantastic. Thank you all, and I appreciate you. Please continue typing in. These are all good answers. Yeah, sorry, I'm just taking a chance to read some of these. Fantastic. So we've got all across the range, and that's good. It's good to know where you are in that range. So thank you for sharing that. There's going to be something for all of you here during this tonight. So really quickly, and this is again just one of the things that I want you to be thinking about as you think about college. For years, there have been philosophers who've tried to understand and talk about and study what a good life is, and they've really come up with 4 themes, basically. There are some others, but these are the main ones they've come up with. It's our relationships with other people, hope, in other words, that we believe that our future is something worth looking forward to. Satisfaction, that's instead of looking forward, that's kind of a looking back thing, right? We complete a job, or an era comes to close, 11th grade finishes, and we look back on 11th grade and we either feel satisfied or dissatisfied, right? And work. And the older we get, the ends become very, very important. Maybe they're not so important for you right now. Your relationships are probably very important, but maybe work isn't. But college especially works in these 2 areas on the ends: relationships and work. We go to college and we meet a lot of people that we become lifelong friends with. Dr. Antman and I met in college, for instance, lifelong friends. Work, of course, college often sets us up for work. And the 2 things in the middle seem to be kind of components, whether we feel satisfied, whether we have hope for our future. They seem to be kind of components of those 2 ideas. So this is very important. And I just want to congratulate you for being here and thinking about it, because it would be so easy to get caught up in the moment right now and feel like there are some things that feel somewhat hopeless right now, right? You all know this, but it would be easy to get bogged down in that. But I appreciate that a lot of you are looking to what happens beyond COVID, right? So again, college is going to be a huge component of your life. And I'm assuming everybody here pretty much wants to go to college. So that's why we're just going to keep talking about it that way. Now, when I've talked to their schools, I've talked about the fact that you don't have to go to college. There are people who don't want to go to college, and that's okay. It's not part of their desires in life. I'm assuming everybody here wants to go. So let's think about our idea of what a good life is and how college works into that, okay? So let me start you with some things you need to know about college and being a music major. So here's the very first thing, and I think this one is really important. There is no such thing as a free ride. I had no idea about the reality of this. I really believe when I started out that if I had a good audition, maybe I got some scholarships, that college was free. And when I mean free, I mean that like nothing cost, there were going to be no cost for me. That there was going to be nothing that I had to pay for. One of the things I found out was that there is always, and I continue to find this out, there's always some costs associated with college, whether that is things like textbooks or whether it's living expenses. A lot of your college scholarships do things like cover tuition, but that still leaves a lot of expenses behind, like that you have to cover, like where you live, how you eat, your gas back and forth, the supplies you need for school. And as musicians, we don't just need textbooks. Sometimes we have to get a new instrument, or we have to get supplies for those instruments, especially. I was surprised to find in college that in my senior year of undergrad, I moved with some friends into a townhouse that was kind of far away from campus, and surprised to find out that across the street from us, there was a group of football players for the football team at Florida State that were living there all together. And they were just living in a townhouse like we were. So they were, I'm sure, having to pay for where they live. There's no such thing as a free ride. So it's important to remember that there's going to be some cost. All right. Here's the second thing. And I want to be very honest with you right now. Being a music major is very busy. And there are a couple of ways in which the music major is unique. So I want to expound on that for you. The first is that music degrees start on day one. Now, in some degree programs, you don't actually start your major until your junior year, or maybe late in your sophomore year, meaning that your first 2 years, you're basically doing things like your core requirements, your liberal arts requirements, whatever they're called at your school. Classes like English, math, American history, your language requirements. You're fulfilling all of those requirements, and you don't really start studying something like maybe psychology and really get into that major until a little bit later on. Music doesn't work that way. Music begins on day one of school. You're going to be going to music classes. You're going to be going to music theory and music literature, music history. You're going to be playing in ensembles and taking lessons. So music begins immediately, and it begins early, and you're immersed in your degree from the very beginning. Hopefully you like that idea, but it is one thing that causes you to be very busy. All right. The second thing about it is that part of being a music major is that you have rehearsals, and rehearsals are classes, and those classes will go throughout the day. So usually they're going to meet after kind of the standard 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. area of your day. They're going to be after that, meaning that you're going to have other classes from kind of 8 to 4, and then you're going to go to rehearsals. And then after that, you might have practice time. All right. You will have practice time. So there is definitely a longer day. Your classes will be more distributed throughout the day. And I will tell you that I used to occasionally be jealous, not very often, but occasionally, when maybe on Thursday, I would be walking up to school, maybe after eating lunch or something from where I lived, to go to some classes, maybe have some rehearsals. I got a full night ahead of me, and I'm seeing other students leaving, like for the weekend. Right. So being a music major is very busy. It is a big commitment. And the other thing I want to tell you is it's 15 credit hours to be a full-time student. That's pretty much the general standard nationally. Your 15 hours as a music student are not the same as someone else's 15 hours. So usually a big class is worth 3 credit hours. Science might be worth 3 credit hours, plus a lab, which is another credit hour, it's worth 4. But sometimes you take, and by the way, credit hours are supposed to be tied to the amount of time you meet. And also there's an unwritten rule that you should spend that same amount of time studying or working for that class. So if I have a 3 credit hour class, it meets maybe twice a week for an hour and a half. Plus I should have about 3 hours of homework or reading or studying, something like that, right? Well, sometimes you're in a band class. For instance, I'm a band person, and you might have 4 rehearsals a week for an hour and a half, or 3 rehearsals a week for an hour and a half. And you may be taking that class for 1 credit hour. And you may be not only doing the 1.5 hour rehearsal 3 times or 4 times a week, but you're also practicing outside of class. So if you start to think about this, you can quickly see how your 15 hours as a music major is not the same as maybe the 15 hours of an economics major or psychology major. So that's important to know. The second thing is that where you go to school, the third thing, where you want to go to school really matters. I want you to think about value when you think about this. When you go to school, you're going to pay for it in some way, some amount. But there's another thing besides money that we don't really talk about a lot when it comes to value, and that is your time. You're going to spend possibly 4 or more years going to a school and being dedicated, this time that you're dedicating to this degree. So you want that to be really valuable to you. You want to make sure that when you leave, you've developed your skills, that you've got knowledge that's new and that you can put to work, maybe that you can get a job in that area. Now, I'll tell you, I taught at a small school before I came to Vanderbilt. And sometimes we would have students who would show up as music majors, and they would say, I will tell you, we had a small school, a small band program. And they'd say, well, my high school band was bigger than this. What's going on? And of course, I was always diplomatic about it. But the first thing I would say to them was, did you not know where you're going to school? Right. So it really matters where you go. If you are going to a school where maybe you're, say, a percussionist and they don't have a percussion teacher, that happens. And maybe you would spend a large portion of your time studying percussion with someone who doesn't really play percussion. This type of stuff happens. So where you go matters, and you want to get the most value you can. Now, I want to tell you, as I'm talking today too, not to get yourself, and we'll discuss this later, but don't get aimed on one school. There's no such thing as the capital T, the school, right? If I'm a law student, I can't say, it's Harvard Law or nothing else, because if I do that and don't get in with a million other people trying to get into Harvard Law, well, I guess I just won't be a law student, right? So there are a lot of brilliant people in this world that teach college. They can't all teach at one school. That means there are great musicians, great teachers everywhere, but you've got to go to the place that's best for you. And that's one of the things we'll be talking about. Where you go to school matters, though. Okay. And the last thing I want to tell you that's very important is you don't need to be a music major to continue in college and afterward. There are a lot of opportunities for non-music majors in college to be involved in music. So if you're here, going back to why are you here, right? Which is one slide ago. If you find yourself, feeling like you're here because you want to do music in college, but you don't know if you really want to be a music major, or you feel like maybe I want to do music and that's going to force me to have to be a major or something like that, y'all, it doesn't work that way either. You can still be really involved at your school and not be a music major. Okay. All right. Moving on. I have a picture of my dad here because this is the question my dad asked me. Is music a real job? Now, my dad changed truck tires. He was a very hard worker. He woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and worked all day, usually kind of left when it was dark, got home when it was dark. And when I started talking about majoring in music, he had a lot of questions. And this might be something that you will experience as well. Is music a real job? Is probably a lot of parents think about that. I think my dad probably imagined me like graduating from school and then trying to play on the street corner or something. He didn't quite understand what it was like to be a music major or what kind of things you could do with a music degree. So we'll be talking about that as well today. But when we think about that question, and as you're thinking about it, one of the things you have to realize is that teaching is a huge part of being a musician. No matter where you end up on the spectrum of music jobs, most likely you're going to be in some way involved in teaching, whether that is as maybe a choir, orchestra, band, general music teacher in public schools or private schools, whether it is as a private lessons studio teacher, whether you're going out and working with the local marching band, whether you are even composers. Composers now spend a lot of their time either coming in via Zoom or flying out and doing rehearsals with schools. There's a lot of teaching involved, and definitely at college. So teaching is probably going to be part of being a musician. The other part, of course, is performing. And there are some people who make their livings just performing. But even a lot of the best musicians who make most of their living performing still teach in some way. You think of Wynton Marsalis, he teaches at a couple of colleges, for instance. So it's pretty common to teach. And so if that's something that really resonates with you, you think, I could teach. I'm interested in teaching music. Even if I really want to be a trombone performance major, then you're on the right track. Another thing that you might want to think about is the military. I have a very good friend who's in the President's Own Marine Band. I went to high school with him, and he's about to retire. He's almost done with 20 years of his career. But he went into the military. He got great training at the military music school, and then he got his master's degree paid for. That actually was a free ride by the GI Bill. And he's traveled all over the world. He's performed a ton. He really makes his job just performing. He makes his living. He does not really do any teaching. So that is a really good way for music to be a job for you. An emerging field has been music therapy. People who they use music as a tool to work with others on a big spectrum. And it could be anything from the tiniest babies to people who are at the end of life, older folks, and all sorts of situations in between. Music therapy is a growing field. There are a lot of music therapists employed in hospice, at hospitals, and rehabilitation programs and schools. That is a growing field that maybe you'd be interested in. There's music business. And as you notice, there's kind of an order here, right? The way that I imagine people find most of their work in music business, that's a lot of different possibilities, from, working at, say, like a music store, repairing instruments, all the way from that to promoting concerts. So there are a lot of jobs in music business. Even included in that might be like mixing engineering, right? Recording. So there are a lot of possibilities in that area. Arts administration, sort of tied closely to music business, but these might be people who help run nonprofit organizations or for-profit groups like symphonies. And this is also a growing field. You can actually get advanced degrees like master's degrees and doctorates in arts administration from a lot of schools now. Of course, composing and arranging is a possibility. I know people who've made a lot of money in that field, maybe working for composing for marching band halftime shows, for instance, on that scale. But also I saw someone said something about film score. That's very much an area that you could find work with a music degree. And then of course there's entrepreneurship, kind of finding your own way. And that's tied to a lot of these jobs that are maybe a little bit lower down here on the bullet list. These are not, when I say they're lower, it's not that one job is better than the other, but I think it has to do with how often people find their work in those areas, or the amount of work they find with a music degree in those areas. So, here's another question for you. Why study music in college? Well, some of you might see it as career preparation. I'm getting ready to go out and get a job. This is what I want to do. Some of you might see it as a pursuit of a passion, just like I'm really interested in music. I just want to get the highest level of training I can in music. I call the third one percolation, right? I hope you know what percolation is. That's like when you're making your coffee. My favorite sound in the morning, and my favorite thing to wake up to is the coffee brewing. Some people go to college and they're really not sure what they want to do, so they do what they feel like maybe they're the best at, and maybe what they're the most interested in at the time. And then other people do maybe major in music to open up other doors. I cannot tell you how many people I know who are lawyers, doctors, they're in finance, they're in social work, they're in teaching in other subjects. They've started their own business. And these are people who have music degrees. And so they have used that music degree to open another door for them. And that's why it's important, y'all, when I tell you that you do not have to have your whole life figured out when you're 18 years old. There is the possibility that you do that 4 years of that degree and the next door opens for you. I will tell you, so many graduate schools respect a music degree because they understand the hard work that it takes, the discipline that it takes to get that degree. So if you learn nothing else tonight, I want you to pay attention to the next 5 minutes. And that question, this is the question about choosing a college. How do you choose a college? We talked about why you're here. We talked about why you might want to major in music. I've tried to be really honest with you about the challenges maybe of being a music major. But what about choosing a college? Maybe you've gotten to this point and you're still on board and you really want to do this, but this might be the big question for you, okay? I think there are only 4 things you need to think about. Now, we can make a list of 100 things, but I think if you think about these 4, it's going to cover everything for you. The first is experience, all right? The second is the location. The third is the quality of the program that you want to major in. And the fourth is the cost. Now, this is going to be in a different order for every person. Let's talk about each of these. And then I want you to warm your fingers up and get ready to type in the chat because you're going to give me your order, okay? So these are in no order. This is random right now, as far as I'm concerned. Experience. Experience at college has to do with the stuff that's maybe not directly tied to your degree program. In fact, maybe sometimes it's not tied to it at all. Maybe it has to do with things like the dining hall. How nice is it? What kind of amenities do you have? What is the gym like? Do you have miles of walking trails and running trails and biking trails on your campus? Do you have the opportunity to study abroad? What are the dorms like? Are the dorms, does that matter to you? Are the dorms extremely nice? Are the dorms one to a room? All of these things, and you can think of more and more and more, are part of the experience at the school. For instance, where I work, a big part of the school experience is that all of the students live on campus. They all live on campus. So, and that's because we're in a city. It's just hard to live in a city, but all our students live on campus. And so they're very tightly knit. They have a lot of friends. Life centers around campus for them. But at some big schools, and we're not a big school, at some really big schools, it's just not possible to all live on campus. Students live off and they have their own apartments, and that's important for them too. That's part of the experience for them. So that's experience. The second one is the location. Now, location might be important to you because you've got some personal goals. This is kind of tied to experience. Like maybe you want to go to the beach every weekend. You want to have that opportunity, even if you don't go. Or we in Middle Tennessee, we have a lot of students who come here that want to hike. They want to go over to the Smoky Mountains. They want to be able to go mountain biking, or they want to go canoeing. We have a lot of rivers around here. So I have a friend who lives in Mesa, Colorado. He teaches in Mesa, Colorado, and it's been the perfect fit for him. He got this job, moved from Florida to all the way out to Colorado, and he is mountain climbing every weekend, every free moment he gets. He loves being outdoors. So location is important, but maybe it's not just important in that sense for you, but maybe you just want to get out of where you live. Maybe that's what's really important. Or maybe you want to go somewhere that's really similar to where you live, but not far, or not just far enough away so you can't drive home. So you live on campus. So like I mentioned, I taught at Georgia Southwestern before I came to Vanderbilt. And we were in the southwest corner of the states where President Carter went to college. And we're in the middle of peanut fields and cotton fields. I mean, it was very rural. A lot of our students came from similar areas in South Georgia and Alabama, but they just didn't want to be close to home. And that was a big motivation for them. So location is important, but that has a different meaning for a lot of people. The quality of the program, hopefully that's important to you, but some people, it's maybe not the most important thing, but the quality of the program would be measured in different ways, right? Let's say you want to be a music major, you might look at the music education program because you want to be a teacher, or you want to be a music major and you want to be like voice performance, and you don't really care about music education because you have your sights set on singing in opera. And so you're really looking at teachers, or you're looking at the opera program at the school. Do they have an opera? That would be a really important starting point. For instance, what are their voice teachers like? Have they sung in operas themselves? Where did they get their training? Those become important things. So the quality of the program also means different things to different people. And then there's cost. Now, we don't have to spend much time talking about cost because you all get that. I'll tell you, for me, cost was everything. My parents weren't going to be able to just put me through school. So I had to get as much scholarship money as I could. I had to go to an affordable college. That was really important. All right, so I want you to take these 4 really quickly, put them in the chat. What is your order? What's first for you? Are you in for the experience? Or you care about the location? Is quality of program most important for you? What about cost? Where do those lie for you? And try to put all 4 together, if you will. I see, here we go. I'm seeing a lot of cost right off the bat. Completely understandable. I'm also seeing a lot of quality. That looks to be number 1. That's great that you're thinking about the quality of the program. I think that's very important. Let's see. You guys are doing such a good job. They're moving fast. They're hard to keep up. Quality, experience, location, cost. And it's so interesting because we see like cost, I see that kind of float around. And usually it seems to trade places for a lot of people with quality. Okay. Cost, location, quality, and experience. You know, it's interesting to see such a range of answers, and I appreciate you all answering that. This is, like I said, is going to be different for every single person, but these are if you learn nothing else tonight, write this down and reflect on this. This is the most important decision you can make in choosing a college. Now, back to this guy with the regretful choice of hairstyle. Okay. I had no idea what I was doing in August of my senior year. And I was lucky to have someone who graduated a couple years ahead of me find me at my job one night where I was working at Walmart and say to me, "What are you doing next year?" And when I said, "I think I majored in music," she said, "Where are you going to go to school?" And I had no idea. And she said, "Well, that's not going to work. You're going to have some kind of plan, right?" And I went home kind of in a panic. And I decided when I went to bed that night that I was going to get up the next day, go in and talk to a guidance counselor and get myself on some kind of path. That was going to be important for me. And I had a great guidance counselor who talked to me about a way to think about the schools I was going to apply to. First of all, she told me that I should apply to multiple schools. And that is a huge piece of advice for all of you. Apply to multiple schools. Now, she told me I should divide them, and I think this is a brilliant idea, her idea, not mine, into 3 sections: my safe schools, my dream schools, and my stretch schools, at least one stretch school. Now, the safe school has nothing to do with the quality of the school. Safe school doesn't mean like I don't really want to go there. It doesn't mean that this school is the bottom of my hierarchy or anything like that. It just means that more than likely, this is the one, this one or two schools, these are going to work out for me, right? I'm probably going to get in. I might get some scholarship money, and it's, you know, cost wise, maybe I can handle this the best. The dream schools were schools that, you know, are would be a huge accomplishment to get into. Maybe they represent the best of the programs in my area. And the stretch schools are honestly the schools where I'm just trying this out because, you know, I'm probably not going to get in. Maybe I don't have any business being there, but I'm going to try, right? So for me, I lived in Northwest Georgia, so I applied to 2 local schools for my safe schools, UT Chattanooga and Jacksonville State University. Both have good music programs. Both are not huge schools. Both are within an hour of where I grew up. I got into both of them. I got scholarship money to both of them. So those were good. Those, again, were kind of my safe schools. Then my dream schools were the University of Georgia, where that was the flagship university in the state of Georgia at the time, and the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. And then for my stretch schools, I applied to a school where they had a really famous trumpet teacher at the time at the University of Kentucky. And that was kind of, again, I didn't think I really had a shot at that, but I was going to go audition for him and see how it went. And then Florida State University. And that's because my high school band director said, you should just try this out and see what happens. So let me take you through my list. And the spoiler alert is I went to FSU for my undergraduate degree, and I wound up in Florida and I taught for a long while. And this is kind of how I ended up being in Florida for more years than I had grown up living in Georgia. So when I applied to UT Chattanooga, like I told you, I got in. It's less than an hour from my house. Good school. The problem is that they did not, even though I was close, I couldn't get out of state. I couldn't get in-state tuition. Sorry, they were going to charge out-of-state tuition, and it was so expensive that just the tuition, not the living, because that hadn't even been added in, just the tuition put it out of reach for cost. And as I told you, cost was number one for me. So Jacksonville State University, I got in. I got a pretty good scholarship, and that kind of bumped to the top of my list. By the way, going to Jacksonville State, this is something you want to look into. The state of Alabama offered in-state tuition to anyone whose county touched Alabama, bordered Alabama, and my county did. So I was able to get in-state tuition and a scholarship. University of Georgia, I got in. I went down there, and it was like stars in my eyes the whole time. The trumpet professor at the time was in the Canadian brass, and I wanted to go there so badly. But one of the things that was interesting that I found out was I had gotten the Hope Scholarship that I told you about earlier. I had that 3.0 or higher than 3.0 GPA. So my tuition was going to be paid for. So all I was going to have to do at UGA was pay to live. Sounds like a great deal, except that the living expenses were really high. It was really expensive to live on campus. My scholarship didn't cover living on campus. It just covered tuition. So I was going to have to pay for housing. And the School of Music at the University of Georgia was not offering any scholarships to students from Georgia because we were already getting the Hope Scholarship. And they didn't want to waste, that's a strong word to use, but they didn't want to, I'll use another word, they didn't want to spend their scholarship money on people who were in state because they wanted to save that for out-of-state people, to try to attract people from out of state. So I wasn't able to get any of that scholarship money there, and it was so expensive that, again, with cost being number one, Georgia was off my list. UT Knoxville was also great, and I got a scholarship there, and I got in, and it got bumped to the top of my list pretty quickly with Jacksonville State. It was more affordable to go to the University of Tennessee out of state than it was to go to the University of Georgia at the time for me. I went up and interviewed and auditioned at the University of Kentucky. I got a scholarship there, but same thing. It was just going to be too expensive. And then the biggest surprise for me is my last audition. I went down to Florida State University. I took an audition. That night, the trumpet professor, Brian Goff, called me, and we had a long talk and talking about a lot of the things I'm talking to you about. He offered me a scholarship, and that scholarship was an in-state tuition waiver. And what that did was it took me from being an out-of-state student tuition to in-state. So it reduced that tuition a bunch. And then on top of that, I got another scholarship from the School of Music, which covered the rest of my tuition and part of my housing. And I got a Pell Grant that I'm going to tell you about. And that was a federal grant that made it so that Florida State not only had a great program, but it was actually the most affordable school for me. Incredibly, FSU was the most affordable school for me. So that's why it's really important to think of your schools this way, organize them this way, and keep your doors, open to different schools. Don't be so intimidated that you don't try one out. I didn't do a private school. I probably should have tried a private school, because private schools tend to have some scholarship money sometimes. Okay, so that was my story. Now, costs of college. I talked about this a little bit, but first of all, you have to pay for tuition, and that's just the money that it costs you to go to classes, right? So a couple things you need to know about tuition. There's in-state tuition at public schools, and there's out-of-state tuition. So if I wanted to go, for instance, to UT Chattanooga, just because I lived nearby, that didn't matter. I still lived in Georgia. So I was going to have to pay out-of-state tuition to go there, and out-of-state tuition costs more. I kind of think on average is about 3 times more, okay, for credit hour. And then there are public versus private schools. Private schools generally cost more than public schools for tuition. Sometimes private schools, did I say that right? Private schools usually cost more than public. But here's the thing, like if you come to our school, Vanderbilt is private, but the fee that you pay to come to school covers everything, right? So sometimes you have to look in there, like that's tuition and housing. That's the what you get, your bottom line, right? So sometimes you have to be careful if you're looking at private schools to make sure that you're not, it might look like a lot of money, but you might be looking at everything, like the whole package, right? So make sure that you understand what you're seeing there, whether it's tuition versus living expenses. Of course, living expenses, it costs money to live in the dorms. A lot of schools that's charged extra. It costs to eat on campus. Supplies for school, like textbooks, you have to buy those. Sometimes you have to buy a new instrument, or you have to get new supplies for instruments. And that is also a cost that maybe we don't think about sometimes. So how do you pay for it? You pay for it with, of course, you can pay for it out of your pocket. Okay, I don't have that bullet point on here. You can pay for it with scholarships. Scholarships can help cover parts of your costs. They might cover, for instance, your tuition or part of your tuition. You might get a housing stipend that helps cover housing. You might get a scholarship that you can just, it's a certain amount of money, you can spend it however you want. Grants. I told you that I got a Pell Grant. These are the things that your high school counselors will really help you with if you talk to them about the grants that are available to you. The Pell Grant that I got was because my family was low income and my parents were, I was from a single parent family. So we were below the threshold for this amount of income that you had to have to get that grant. And thanks to that grant, like I said, it made FSU more affordable than even my local schools. However, I would have gotten that grant no matter where I went to school. Right. So that's something that you want to look into. And we're going to talk about how you get those grants in a minute. Loans, you can take out student loans. The government will give you loans. Private banks will give you loans. I don't suggest that, by the way, but they will. And you can take that money, pay for college, and then you owe it back later. The difference between loans and grants and loans and scholarships is that loans have to be paid back. And so that's very important to remember. And then there's service. And service is an interesting way that you can pay for school. One really prominent way is through the military. You go to the military, maybe you join the reserves, or you do 4 years in the military and you're able to access the Montgomery GI Bill, which pays for tuition and probably a few extra costs along the way. There's also loan cancellation that's only usually available to people who are teachers, and you have to teach in usually Title I schools or high need areas geographically. And so I would never bank on that when I'm going to school. I would never take out a loan and say, I'll get this canceled, no problem. Don't do that, because those policies change a lot. I just want you to know it's an option. It's there, but that's not one that is like a signed, sealed, and delivered guarantee that you're going to get those loans canceled. Okay. So if you want to major in music, here's, if you took those 4 things I talked about earlier, that's all you learn. Awesome. If you want to learn a second thing, pay attention to this, okay? When you major in music, this is how you get there. You have to do 2 applications to colleges. And by the way, don't forget, apply to more than one school, right? Remember that setup, the dream, the safe school, dream school, and stretch school, okay? But when you apply to major in music, you have to do 2 applications. One application is going to be to the university itself, to the school itself, and the other one is going to be to the School of Music. That is not the way it works for all other college students, by the way, okay? But that is how it works for music. So just know that you're going to be doing 2 applications, all right? What do you need for the applications? It's not just like fill out a piece of paper or do an online form. There are things you're going to need, especially for your School of Music application. So you might need a repertoire list. That might be everything you've played at solo and ensemble, every etude book you've studied out of, every piece of music you've played in band as best you can remember. Now, would I put what I did in 8th grade? No, I would not do that. I might not put everything that I did in band or orchestra or chorus. I might think of what do we do at MPA, for instance, right? Because that's going to represent like the best stuff you worked on. Or what do we work on that I know is really difficult, technically challenging maybe. I would put those on there. You're going to need recommendations. Usually you need at least 1. You might need 2 or 3. And you need to ask your choir teacher, your orchestra teacher, your band director. You need to ask them for those recommendations for sure. You could ask other teachers at school who've seen your academic work, but they're definitely going to want to see at least 1 recommendation that talks about your musical ability. So don't get 3 from like your English teacher, your math teacher, and your social studies teacher. You got to make sure you have something from a music teacher. Private lessons teachers, if you have private lessons, are also a great source for that. You might have to do a personal essay. You might have to do a resume. If you haven't done a resume, I would encourage you to maybe start working on a resume that is short. It's maybe like 2 pages, but it highlights. And if you want to email me, I can give you an example maybe, but it just highlights what you've done in your musical activities and in school. Okay. It doesn't talk about every single award you've ever gotten necessarily. It doesn't talk about everything you've done, even in music, like your repertoire list might, but it just shows that what you've done over the years in a very quick detail. That's what they're going to want there. They're not going to want something that's 20 pages. They want it to be like 2. And you might even be asked to have a photo so that they can identify you when you walk in for auditions. A lot of schools require that also. So a lot of things, you can't just do this in like 5 minutes. All right. There's some preparation, and you're going to want to get on websites and look at what they need. And I guarantee you that it's going to be some mix of this list right here, maybe a few things outside of this list, maybe not all of it. But if you do 3 or 4 applications in music schools, you're pretty much going to cover all those things right there. All right. Some schools are going to do a pre-screening. So they might ask you even to make a video. I remember University of Kentucky asked me to do that. You had to actually record yourself. I had to record myself playing something and send it in. And then they invited me for the auditions. Some schools will not require that though. So if you need to do a pre-screening, you need to know that pretty early. Okay. So the auditions, you're going to audition for music school. That's going to be a part of it no matter what. Some of those auditions might be recorded, especially now. Some of them might be not on the campus of the school. A lot of big schools, like especially music conservatories, will actually do nationwide auditions. So Eastman might have a Dallas location and an Atlanta location and a Miami location and a Los Angeles location and a Chicago location, right? They might do auditions in those places. You're going to find that out on their websites. That's how you're going to find that information. But this is something that you want to know about, whether you have to go on campus or not. And especially this year, that's going to be important. Usually auditions are in the spring, and they're between January and April. And by the way, this is how you get scholarships. It's not only about entrance, but it's about scholarships at this time as well. Some schools will let you audition outside of that spring window, but usually their scholarship auditions are closed at that point, and you're just auditioning for entrance. So you need to know whether or not you have to travel. That's important. Whether you need to record something, especially if you're at a school that wants a pre-screening. And then the big question is like, what do you play? How do you know what you play? That's all going to be on the websites of those schools. Generally, I would encourage you to check that first before you email anyone. right? So if you went to my school, Blair School of Music at Vanderbilt, you got on the website, there's an auditions tab, and you look under there and it's got all the information about pre-screening and when the auditions are. And then at the bottom of that page, there's a big list of what you would need to audition for each voice area, for piano, for strings, for winds. It's all listed. Okay. So some schools will really tell you exactly what they want. Some have more like recommended stuff. When I worked at Georgia Southwestern, we just recommended things. So like for trumpet, we might say your scales and a solo you've played for solo and ensemble, right? So some schools will recommend some schools will require exact things to play, or they'll give you a very short list of things to choose from. So you need to think about, or you find out whether the audition material is required or whether they have a recommended list. And then it's probably going to be something like this right here. This list is probably, again, if you do 3 or 4 auditions, it's going to be covered in this list. Scales, for sure. Everyone's going to ask for scales. It shows your technical ability and your range, but you also might be asked for a solo and ensemble solo. Maybe they'll even say like it needs to be a grade 4 or higher. You might be asked for etudes, something you've been working on out of an etude book, and you might even be asked to play excerpts of some kind, orchestra or band, and they probably will supply you with those. They'll probably have PDFs or something like that they can send you. If you're really not sure, if you can't find this information, you can always email the professor of your instrument at the school. Say you're a trumpet player, you can email the trumpet professor and ask them. We like to respond to those emails, so we probably will, but I encourage you to look at the website first. It makes a bad impression to just send somebody an email and say, tell me everything, right? So make sure it's obvious you've done some legwork on your own. All right, pro tip, practice your auditions in front of other humans. When I was a senior in college, we had a guest conductor come in for this thing called the Tri-State Festival at FSU, and I was his rehearsal assistant. And he wanted me to conduct a piece during, part of the deal was I got to conduct a piece for him during one of the rehearsals, and he was going to give me feedback. And I got up there and I just didn't do a very good job, to be honest with you. I was nervous and I hadn't ever done that. And he said, have you ever conducted in front of people? I said, no. And he said, okay, well, it's understandable you're nervous. What about your senior recital? Have you played that in front of people? And I said, well, no, of course not. And he said, well, the same thing's going to happen to you. You need to practice in front of other people. And it was a really good piece of advice. Any piece of your audition you can play in front of other people, even if it's your family, or if it's going outside and playing for especially now, playing for a neighbor, getting them to agree to listen to you. The more you can do that in front of other people, the better, especially if you're live auditioning. So make sure that you get runs in front of other human beings. Put yourself under a little pressure, because when you walk in that room, if you're somebody who like I was, you're going to get nervous. There are going to be 5 or 6 people maybe you don't know sitting in that room, and they're going to be old like me with gray hair and staring at you, and you might all of a sudden get really nervous. Prepare yourself for that. Okay. I remember walking into the first audition at University of Georgia and just about feeling like I was going to pass out. By the time I did my last audition, it was not that bad because I knew what to expect. So the more you can practice with a little bit of pressure on yourself, the better. Okay. Other things, you want to major in music, you need to get to know the faculty. You need to look them up. A lot of faculty are now on social media. You need to stalk them on Instagram. You need to know what they do. Do they perform a lot? Have they done a bunch of publications in journals? Are they well known? Do they present at FMEA? You want to know about that faculty. You want to actually get in contact with them. Say you're a junior and you really want to go to a school like UCF and you play the violin. Find a professor, email them, ask them if they'd be willing to do a Zoom lesson at some point. A lot of professors will do a lesson with you. If it's the orchestra director, a lot of them will talk with you and meet with you and talk about your goals. But you need to get to know the faculty. You don't want to just show up to a place where you don't know anyone and what they do. Find out, research the program. What is the size of it? What do they do? Do they travel? Do they do tours? Do they do recordings? Does your studio, what's going to happen at your studio? Are you going to have a class every week? Do you give concerts? What do the graduates do? Do they get jobs? Do they seem to go on and continue in music? Or can you not find a trail of graduates from that school? That's important stuff, okay? What are the degree requirements? So say you want to be a music education major. Do you have to student teach? Hopefully you do. Do you have to do the Ed TPA? in your state? Is that a requirement maybe at that school? Maybe you're going from Florida out of state. I'll tell you right now, if you came from Florida to Tennessee, Tennessee requires EdTPA. You'd have to complete it. So is that something that you might have to do? Do you have to take maybe some different classes at different schools? The answer to that is absolutely. So you might want to look at your number of credit hours, because credit hours affect how much time it takes to complete a degree. All important stuff. And then you want to think about what scholarships are available at that school. You want to ask those questions to people when you audition, or even before you audition. Do they have music scholarships? Those scholarships come directly from the School of Music because they want you, okay? Academic scholarships come from the big school because they want you also, and they want you for your good grades. Grades are important, y'all. GPA is important for those reasons, those academic scholarships. And then the federal and state opportunities, that's more on you, right? That's you working with your guidance counselor. That's your parents completing FAFSA so that you can find out what's available to you. What can you do right now? Apply to school before this coming month ends. Get your applications in if you're a senior. If you're not, then just plan that you're going to do your applications early. A lot of schools will now waive the costs of applying. That's great. Or they'll have a month where if you apply in September, it's free. That didn't exist when I was in school. It was like $50 to apply to a school and you just had to pay it. Some school systems will even reimburse you for your application fees. Your parents can complete FAFSA. They have to do that for you because it's about their tax information, and that tells the government what you're eligible for, especially grants and loans. Very important. Take the ACT and SAT multiple times. I took it once, and I just took SAT, and I just kind of we had a Friday night football game, and I wandered into Dalton High School at 7:57 a.m. for the 8 a.m. SAT, and I didn't do so well. And I'm lucky that I got into school. I had a good grade point average. And by the way, that's a balance that's important. Maybe you're not a great test taker. That's why you take it multiple times, for one thing. But also, maybe you're not a great test taker like me. I'm not. But you got a really good grade point average. A lot of schools they look at those differently. They balance them differently, or they look at them as a spectrum, right? What have you done in school? Are you a person with a lot of service hours? Are you a person with great recommendations? Did you have a good GPA? Or maybe your GPA wasn't awesome, but did you have really good ACT, SAT? Those things are important. So take them seriously. And I think a good tip for you is to take them multiple times. By the way, those fees are also being reimbursed now or paid for by a lot of school systems. Up here in Metro Nashville Public Schools, you can take the SAT and ACT once, and you get a voucher for free. You get to pay for it after that, but you get a voucher from the school system to do that. GPA, keep it up. If you're a sophomore right now, a junior, and you're feeling like you could do better on it, then this is the time to make a big push, okay? It does matter. You can start, if you're a senior, you can start applying for grants and scholarships. That's where your guidance counselors come in and are helpful to you. Remember, federal grants come from the big federal government. The grants are money you do not have to pay back. Private scholarships are sponsored by a lot of different organizations, churches, by community groups. And, your guidance counselor is your person, your contact person when it comes to those. They'll know if Coca-Cola offers a scholarship, or if the grocery store in the area offers a scholarship, or a church, and they'll let you know what you have to do. Maybe you have to write an essay with your application, or maybe you have to go play for them. There are some places that have community organizations that give a music scholarship. When I was in Brevard County, Florida, when I taught there were multiple organizations that would give $500, $1,000 a year to students for music scholarships, and all they had to do was apply and maybe go play their solo and ensemble piece for them. So your counselor will be a big help for you on that. And of course, there's the audition music, especially if you are the person who's in a season right now for auditions. Start looking at those requirements, start getting that together. You've got the Christmas break. It's the perfect time to get serious about that. If you're not majoring in music, I'm going to talk to you very quickly. You can still be involved in music on campus. You should check out the campus ensembles. These are non-audition groups. Lots of big schools and even small schools have non-audition groups. Lots of even smaller schools, you don't have to be a music major, but you can still get into their band, orchestra, or chorus without being a music major. You might have to audition, but you can still get in their premier group without being a music major. check out those campus ensembles. Of course, you know about marching band and pep band. In fact, those groups at a lot of colleges, they actually pay you. They're like a job. Maybe you didn't know that, but especially basketball, pep band, you get paid really often to do that. It's like a job. You show up, you get paid for it. Smaller schools often have opportunities for non-majors to participate fully. Like I just said, you can make their top ensembles, and some smaller schools have scholarship money that's available, and you can actually audition if they need a bassoon player. I had a student who went to the University of Florida. He's a dentist now, but through his undergraduate degree and master's degree, he played the bassoon, took lessons, played in the band, and he got a nice scholarship for that. So non-music majors, there are possibilities there. And the last thing, because I got to wrap up, but I want to say that if you're interested in teaching, it is one of the most meaningful jobs you can do. And it's all that stuff we talked about, how to live a meaningful life. The opportunities are there. Nobody said to live a meaningful life, you have to make a bunch of money. What they did say is that you need to feel a sense of security, that you need to have good relationships with other people, that your work has to be meaningful, and that you should feel satisfied with what you do when you look back on your life. And y'all, teaching is one of the ultimate jobs for that, one of the most meaningful jobs you can have. So I'd be happy to talk to anybody who's considered a music education career. And the last thing is, please take down my email. I'm not recruiting you to Vanderbilt University. I'm happy to just talk to you about anything that comes along with a career in music or anything else. I'll tell you that I'll encourage all of you, I said earlier, to try to apply to at least one private school. Here's why. Vanderbilt is expensive. It's an expensive school, but Vanderbilt has a lot of money in the bank. It's one of these schools that sits on a huge endowment, and they decided about 15 years ago to eliminate student loans. So while Vanderbilt can be intimidating because it seems like a difficult school to get into maybe, or a really expensive school, the truth is, if you do your FAFSA, you apply, and you find out that you normally should take out a student loan to cover, say, $30,000. Well, Vanderbilt just says, you know what? We're just going to cover that. So no student loans. They've eliminated student loans for all of our students. It's called Opportunity Vanderbilt. So a lot of private schools have those opportunities built in that might make them actually more affordable. They might be the most cost-effective school you can find. So at least include one of those schools on there. Now, I know I got to wrap up. Dr. Antman is do you want me to take some questions now, or?
Yeah, would you like me to read you a couple questions?
Yeah, I'd love to hear some.
So I'm going to just kind of go through some of these. Now, some of you guys asked questions during the presentation, and I answered ones that I could answer. I left some of the ones that I wanted to hear from Dr. Clark on. Somebody asked, do universities value private lessons? So if a student is lower income, can't afford lessons, does that kind of eliminate them from being a music major if they didn't study privately in high school? Absolutely not. And I hope that makes you feel better to hear that, but I'm not just saying that. That's real. What they care about is that you've had some experiences in high school that show that you have potential, right? So to me, in Florida, one of those is solo and ensemble. If you do a solo 3 or 4 of your years in high school, if you're going, maybe taking your solo to state solo and ensemble, maybe 1 year or something like that. If you're doing grade 4, grade 5, grade 6 type of literature, which your band directors, if you are working hard, your band directors can help you prepare for those. There are now tutorials online on YouTube for a lot of those solos. I know our trombone professor at Vanderbilt has done tons of tutorials now on grade 2, grade 3, grade 4 solos. So that is, I got to tell you, that initiative of someone who doesn't take lessons and is still doing those things, to me, that's very valuable. Someone, if I'm looking at people who are auditioning. So no, it does not disqualify you if you're not taking private lessons. Absolutely not. Okay, next, Dr. Clark, is somebody wants to know what is the difference between a music education major and a music performance major, if you could. Yeah, great question. So music education majors are aimed at teaching. That's their ultimate end goal of their degree, and they're going to get teacher certification at the end so that they can go to work immediately in a school, whether it's
whatever level. The certification is K-12, so it could be elementary, middle, or high school, and it could be private or public. That's kind of their end goal, and that's what the big difference is. The performance degree, their end goal is to graduate having studied a lot of different literature, a lot of different, performed a lot of different repertoires, been part of a lot of different performances, and they're now ready to move on to some other level of performance, whether that's getting a graduate degree or going to work professionally or beginning maybe to teach private lessons. So it's kind of the differences in the end goal. When you're in the degree, though, the curriculum, the way it looks, is that music education majors take classes that are aimed at music education. So they're going to be taking things like brass methods, where you learn to play all the brass instruments, or woodwind methods, string methods, choral methods, percussion methods, where you learn how to play all those instruments and teach them. They're going to be taking also classes in the education building with other education majors. So like classroom psychology, classroom management, child psychology, those sorts of classes. And the performance majors won't be taking those sorts of classes. I'd be happy to clarify more if anybody wants any more on that.
Well, and that has a lot to do with this. Juliana says she wants to major in music education with all of her heart, but she also wants to do performance. Do you have any advice on what to do when you want both?
Well, some schools allow you to double major. That is something that you can look at for that school. And I would talk to a faculty member about that, specifically the teacher who you would be studying with. So if you're a flute performance major, I would talk to the flute professor about that. And kind of get their advice. And if they, one of the things you're going to want to know is this common at this school? Are students able to pull off a double major? At some schools, it just doesn't happen because of the course load and the requirements that they have. So at a lot of schools, I will tell you, the performance and music education situation, it can look two different ways. At some schools, it will look like almost the same degree in a lot of ways. You'll get at least as far as your performance classes, like you'll be treated like a performance person, and a performance person will be treated like you. There are just high expectations. You're taking lessons with the same professor. You're in the same studio class. You have the opportunity to perform in the same ensembles. And to be honest with you, on the other side of that, at some schools, the performance majors are treated a little differently. Maybe they at first study with a professor, and especially if you go to a big school, you might, if you're a music education major, study with a graduate assistant, not with a professor. That happens sometimes, and it's something you might want to ask about at your school. But I'll tell you, if I were someone who was interested in both, I would think about pursuing that double major if I really thought that was what I wanted to do, because you can always change your mind 2 years into it. Just because you start a major doesn't mean you have to finish it. Okay. Same thing with minors. Just because you start a minor doesn't mean you have to finish it. A lot of people minor in music and they do a year of it, and then maybe they decide that they just can't keep up with the coursework, but they're still going to keep playing in band or something. So you could always start out as a double major and change either way, away from music education or away from performance. That'll be my advice. So
McKenna asks, she's interested in the Disney College program. Do you have any information, or have you had any students be successful with it? I have not. Me personally, I have not had students go through the Disney College program. I'm not sure what music opportunities are there. So McKenna, that might be something you might want to check with guidance with at your school, or reach out to Disney. They've got a great performing arts website. And actually, I'll tell you what, I'm going to put my email address in the chat. I have a friend who works in Disney Performing Arts. And if you send me an email, I'll get you that information. Some of the questions in here, we're going to do a lightning round, Dr. Clark.
Okay.
And we're going to focus on the questions that maybe he didn't cover. Some of you guys asked questions earlier on, and he's gone over those then. Anything having to do with the audition or what you need to do for the audition, you're going to want to reach out to the professors at the universities that you're applying for. So like a lot of my students at school, if they're applying, so I have some flute players who are applying to be flute performance majors or education majors at different schools, and we've put them in touch with the flute professors who've told them exactly what they want. And a lot of those professors, by the way, will give you a free private lesson if you tell them you want to go to the school. And what I always tell my students is ask for the lesson. And then when you go there, say, I want to do this. What do I need to do between now and my audition to be successful? William Steed asks, being a music teacher, has income ever been a concern for you? I have a very deep passion for music and teaching. Dr. Clark?
Yeah, income is a concern for everyone in this world. So I want you to think about this. You have a passion. When you think about that whole idea of what makes a good life, doing something you're passionate about is so important. It relates to everything on the, of those ideas. So what if what you do, I get that question. What if what you really want to do, you don't feel like it pays extremely well? Well, here's something. Don't get saddled with a ton of debt in college. Go to a college that's really affordable so that when you get out, you're not paying a bunch back in student loans. Because that's the thing. Teaching is actually a very good job. It's a very good steady income job. You get benefits as part of teaching, and you can do a long career. You can have retirement when it's over that you pay into. So it actually is a very good, stable job that allows for a lot of just a really meaningful life and a lot of flexibility. It kind of checks all the boxes, but teaching is difficult financially when you owe a lot of money, especially for student loans. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Make cost number one and then follow your passion.
And William, I don't know if you knew this, but in Florida, they just raised the minimum pay for teachers significantly this year. Mm-hmm. So for example, if you were to work in Orange County, which is where I teach, the beginning teacher now makes $47,500, which for Florida is a huge increase. That's and great. The benefits, I don't pay for health insurance because the school district covers that for me, which you'll learn in time is a huge cost and a huge factor. Somebody wants to know, so a lot of people asking about jazz. If they're majoring in jazz, do they need to do a concert audition? And I'm guessing that's going to vary by school.
It depends on the school, and it also depends on if you're actually majoring in jazz. Like some schools have a jazz performance program, but some schools will take you in as a music major, like a performance major, and your concentration is jazz. Now that's really different, because if you're a jazz major and that school has a jazz major, then that means that you have a specific curriculum that you're going to follow, and you probably really are going to be a jazz only person when you get there. If you have a jazz emphasis or a jazz concentration, that means that there's another curriculum that's there, and you're going to be in that curriculum following that plan, and then you're going to be doing almost like electives in jazz that you're going to spend a lot of time in, but it's not going to be it's not going to be the only thing you do. So it's important to know what you're applying for, what kind of program there.
Yep. So multiple people asking about, and we've already just addressed double majors, asking about can they study more than one thing? Somebody asked, can we do music ed and then do music performance after?
Absolutely. A lot of people do that. A lot of people do a music ed degree and they'll go right into a performance degree. And then when they finish that performance degree, they'll decide what to do. They'll have a master's in performance, which is 2 years generally. And then that's a really nice position because you have an education degree, you're certified to teach. You could just go right to work as a teacher, and you make possibly a little more money because you have a master's degree at that time. So yes, that is absolutely possible. And to answer the double major question, maybe some people are also wondering, can you major in music and something else like medicine? Or right, like maybe you're thinking on those lines, whatever, plug in whatever else there. The answer is yes, but it's very school specific. Sometimes it makes you be in school 5 years instead of 4, something like that. But yes, it is possible. And that is a question I would ask the people at your school you're interested in. Say you want to go to USF, you play the tuba and you want to know about that. Ask that faculty member, ask if they know if people have done that before.
So somebody said, do I need to take theory in high school for a music ed major?
No, you don't need to do that. A lot of schools will, if your high school offers that, a lot of schools will give you a placement test when you get to the school, and they'll figure out what level of theory you need to be in. But no school that I know of accepts AP music theory or IB music theory to replace a class as a credit. No, I don't know that exists. I've not encountered that before. Do you know about that, Dr. Hammond?
Yeah, most I know in Florida, if you take AP music theory, you won't get music theory credit for the AP class. You might get elective credit, but it's not going to get you out of college theory. College theory for music majors is going to be a little more intense.
And it's very important. Yeah, it's very important. So they want to put you through their program, their 4 semesters always.
Somebody asked, how likely is to get a job teaching right out of school with a bachelor's degree in music education? And I'll tell you, in Florida right now, we need music teachers bad. If you graduate with a bachelor's degree in music education, you have a very good chance of getting a job.
You're going to get a job. It depends on if you're willing to go where the jobs are sometimes, but you're going to get a job if you will go where it is. That's for sure. Yeah.
How hard is pursuing music performance as a career?
Well,
it's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question. And if you think back to what something I said earlier, like what can you do with a music degree? It depends on one thing is like what you're willing to do. Like, are you willing to do a lot of teaching? Music performance people, they tend to do a lot of teaching. It might be private lessons. It might be going out and working in schools. Like in the state of Texas, a lot of those big music programs, they actually employ people from the area who are musicians, and they come in and they teach. They might do sectionals. They might do lessons. And that is actually a big part of their income. If you're willing to do that, then I think it becomes a more, excuse me, it becomes an easier path if you're willing to teach and you want to perform. Again, there's also the military groups are a nice way to perform and not do any teaching. Just all you do is perform for a living. You have to think about it. You like use a sports reference. I mean, you think about the percentage, how small that percentage is of people who play football in the NFL or Major League Baseball compared to how many kids are playing Little League. So it's kind of the same with music. Those biggest jobs, excuse me, that are, I'm sorry, those biggest jobs that are like with the New York Symphony, for instance. I mean, those are going to be very difficult to come by. But again, if you're willing to work your way up over time, if you're willing to teach, I think it's possible. A lot of performers teach in colleges as well.
So we have a lot of questions about what they've done in high school as far as I haven't done solo and ensemble, or somebody's asking in the chat, they've been homeschooled and they didn't do a lot of those things before now. Is it going to reflect poorly on them? And I would guess, Dr. Clark, that probably the biggest factor is going to be that audition. Audition's
extremely important. I think Dr. Antman gave us some really good advice, and that is to reach out to the faculty member and ask them for a lesson ahead of time. Ideally, the best time to do this is your junior year. Juniors that are listening, that's the best time. Seniors, if you're finding yourself doing that right now, that's not a huge help to you, I understand, but at least reach out to them and, make a connection with them. Ask them if they're interested or willing in any way to maybe do a short Zoom lesson before the auditions begin. You're still at a good time right now. And they might, even if they take you through their warm-up routine, they might at the end suggest, like Dr. Hammond said, some things you can do between now and say an audition in February. That's still a lot of time to get things together. So they might even say, play this piece, make sure you're working on this etude. And the thing is, you've already made a connection with that person. And so that's really valuable too. They're going to remember you when it comes time to audition.
So also somebody asks, they want to go into orchestral or wind symphony conducting. Do you recommend they go into music education or music performance?
That's a tough one. I think personally, I would recommend you go into music education because you can get a job right out of school. You can teach and get experience conducting at the same time. And then you can work yourself up financially by saving money, figuring out where you want to go, building your resume, and go to graduate school. And graduate school is very important for people who want to be conductors. The school you go to, the people you study with, that is, in my opinion, make or break for people in that world. There are, you maybe, if you know about this, some of the greatest conductors were performance people. So you think of like Leonard Bernstein or Aaron Copland here in America. They are pianists. They're performers. They're unbelievable performers. So of course you look at their path and you think, well, maybe I need to be a performance person. It's possible to go that direction, but I think the difficulty is that those people often don't have practice conducting and rehearsing the way that someone in public school teaching gets to. So I think the real strength is in a music education degree. You understand not only how to teach, but you get a ton of practice when you're out working. and you understand how all the instruments work. You get all the music theory background. It's kind of like all the best of all the worlds when it comes to conducting, in my opinion.
McKenna asked about your email address. McKenna, it's on the screen right now.
I've got a picture of my business card, and it's right there at the bottom. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I'm circling it.
Just going through here, trying to get the ones we've gotten. Audition process for music theory and composition majors. Is it different from a music performance audition?
All right. So if you want to be a music theory major, and music theory is a undergraduate, is a rare degree program. Just so you know, there aren't music history and music theory. They sort of live in graduate school. Not always true. That's not universal, but you don't see just every school has a music theory major. Every school has a music history major for undergrad. So your bachelor's degree, you don't see that. Usually that's a master's degree or a doctorate level degree, but it does exist. So composition definitely exists as an undergraduate bachelor's degree. So if you're theory or composition, first of all, you need to look at the requirements for those schools. Some of them might ask you to audition, like play an instrument. They probably will, and you probably need to anyway, because that's a scholarship audition. And they're also going to want to know like what you can do performance-wise for them. So if you're a really good saxophone player and you're a composition person, they know that you'll fit in the band or the jazz band, that they'll have a place for you, and they may even give you a scholarship for that. But the other thing that you have to have is a portfolio. So if you want to be a composition major, you need to be doing some sort of composition now, and you need to start putting together that portfolio. Several examples maybe that show the work you've written. You'll look at some schools, they might even tell you exactly what to include, like something that's a 4-part chorale. They might ask for that, or an arrangement of a piece for one instrumentation, arrange it for another. So a hymn arranged for brass quintet, or a string quartet arranged for choir with text set to it. They might ask for that sort of thing. So it's going to be definitely each individual school that you need to check in with.
Okay, so a couple of the questions on here, I'm just going to let you know you probably need to check with guidance at your school. For example, once you've taken an AP exam, do you have to apply for credit through your college? I know at a lot of the public universities in Florida, those are on your transcripts that go to the university, and in most cases, you'll get credit for that right away. And Dr. Clark, I'm answering that because I have students going through the same thing right now, and we just sat through that. So Everett, I would definitely talk to guidance, make sure it's on your transcript, and then talk to the school, because if it's a private school, Dr. Clark, it might be different, right? That's
right. And, and schools they are funny about these things sometimes. Sometimes, like if you went to community college for to knock out some summer classes, you actually need to get the clearance for that ahead of time. Like if you're in school, like say you want to go to some summer classes between freshman and sophomore year, you actually want to get clearance for that. And there are forms schools have, and they'll approve it ahead of time so that you don't take it and then find out, oh, they don't accept it. It gets really weird sometimes when they have to work across state borders, for instance. Sometimes classes aren't accepted, or the public to private thing. And it's exactly what Dr. Antman said. Sometimes, private schools may or may not give you credit for things, and it might be kind of baffling. So you do want to check with the schools on that.
So, and then Candace has asked, how useful are dual enrollment and AP credits for music majors? Which one would be better to take, and how many courses should I take to guarantee the transfer of credits? We have a lot of students at our school that do dual enrollment. We have a lot of students that do AP, and the credits when you get to college, I believe, count the same. A 3-credit class is a 3-credit class.
That's right. And that's great. I would encourage you to transfer as many credits as you can. My concern about dual enrollment, excuse me, my concern about dual enrollment has always been that it keeps students, if it keeps students out of our music classes or the music classes they want to take. Otherwise, I say get those classes, get those credits, because that's like a coupon. It's like going to college with a coupon, because when you are able to get those credits, you don't have to take certain classes. Maybe you don't have to take the 2 required freshman English classes. You've got credit for those. That means you don't have to pay for them. You don't have to spend the time on them. So I definitely encourage you to take as many credits as you can with you. As far as music goes, okay. I'm sorry. I was going to say, as far as music goes, though, just no music classes are going to transfer. That's just not going to happen if you're a music major.
And if you're going to be a music major, knock out the classes you don't want to take in college. Go get those math credits done, get the science credits done. When you get to college, you're gonna have to take those music classes anyway. I do get that question a lot at school, Dr. Clark, where kids go to our local community college for dual enrollment and they want to take music theory, and we tell them don't do that. You use that for other classes. We've had several questions about the difficulty of getting scholarships. It's probably different from for every university, but if you're a student, you're wondering that, we're going to have some other sessions in the next couple of months talking about that specifically. But Dr. Clark did a really nice job during the session of talking about private schools versus public schools and different financial aid opportunities. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to that, Dr. Clark.
Was the question about the difficulty of getting scholarships?
Yeah, they want to know how hard is it to get a music scholarship?
Well, so much of that depends on sometimes some factors that are beyond your control, like how many people are auditioning, for instance, what kind of your voice or your instrument, like how in demand it is. There are certain instruments that, especially that are in high demand. In the orchestra world, viola, bass, in the band world and orchestra too, oboe, bassoon. For instance, those, there just may not be as many of those musicians out there that are vying for those scholarships, and schools always need them. So in some ways, I mean, I would think it's a little bit more difficult sometimes if you play an instrument that maybe is in high demand. But again, it comes down to really just a few things that are really important. That audition is super important. You don't need to worry about your again, if you haven't had private lessons, that doesn't automatically disqualify you. But your GPA is something you can control. That's something that is important. That also, when schools look at GPA, they're not just thinking about your academic achievement. They're thinking about things like this person comes to school every day, right? This person completes their homework and turns it in on time. This person, shows up and takes the test. They finish the assignment. That's what schools are thinking about when a lot of times they see your GPA. They're not thinking about your IQ. And so I would say, it depends on the school you're going to, and it depends on how many people are auditioning, but control the things you can control, right? Make sure that you have reached out and you know what your audition material is, and you're really well prepared. Make sure that you are controlling that GPA, taking multiple SAT, ACT, and I can't stress enough how important it is to just apply to a wide range of schools, because that's also going to be where you find different scholarship opportunities.
And I think it was Hannah that asked in there, can you be in the Marching Chiefs at FSU and get a scholarship? And if you're a music major, you can. I have students who are there now who are on or who have been on scholarship that are in the Marching Chiefs. Micah asked, if you play a level 6 and 7 pieces for solo ensemble, will it help with getting into college? And I would guess, Dr. Clark, that it's more about the quality of your audition than the difficulty of the audition.
That says a lot about, maybe what you've been working on. But of course, quality of audition is going to be important. The fact that you're able to go in there and play it is really important. Don't just write down some grade 6 and 7 solos that you worked on for a little bit, for instance, because you don't want someone to say, "Hey, how did this go?" Right? And you didn't perform it or something like that. Make sure that you are really prepared for that audition. Absolutely. Yeah. But what does it say? If I'm looking at that, it says, this person has, at least they're aware of those solos. That means they are either really curious about their instrument, or they're studying privately, or they've been working with their band director on the best literature out there. So I think it definitely says something. I don't think that it's something that doesn't matter. Yeah.
And our final question of the evening comes from Alessandro, who wants to know, if you decide to go into voice and opera, how do you feel about this program? What would the program consist of? I'm guessing, Dr. Clark, a voice and opera major is probably no different than any other performance major.
Yeah, it's a performance degree. And all the performance degrees, you have to think about what the end goal is. The end goal for that performance degree for opera is to perform in operas. And so, you're going to be, it's a different type of vocal training, for one thing. You're gonna have to study with teachers that have experience in opera and operatic performance. One of the things you want to look at for that program is and I'm speaking on this with actually that's what Vanderbilt does. Vanderbilt Voice, one of the big areas here is opera. And you want to look at your faculty members and find out what they have done, whether they have experience really singing in opera, whether they've toured with companies or they've been lead roles in major festivals or major companies. And you also want to see what the graduates are doing, right? Like, are the graduates actually going and doing summer opera workshops and festivals? And are they finding employment? Are they actually singing? Are they working at maybe you see they're working at college and singing in opera? If I saw that, I would think, man, that's a good program, right? If I see quite a few of their graduates doing that. If you can't find a trail for their graduates, though, like you don't seem to find people on a web search that went to that school, maybe it's the quality of program is an issue.
All right. Well, I think that's it. As far as we got one more here, and this will be the last one. When a college says priority date December 1st, does that mean I have to send in my audition before that date, or will they take them after?
Yeah, so a lot of times that means, and I'm assuming you're looking at like the application to the big school, right? I could say the big school, the university. Let's say, remember how I told you have to do 2 applications? Usually that priority application thing has to do with like your application at the school. Let's use Stetson. Say you're going to apply to Stetson. They're going to require 2 applications. And so they have a priority date. All schools do now. So that's probably what they're talking about. It's probably not to the School of Music. In some cases it is, but generally when they're talking about priority applications, they're talking about to the big school. If I would say if the School of Music has a priority date, get it in as soon as you can. The question was if they'll accept. Oh, I lost it. What was the question? If they'll accept your audition?
If they'll accept it after the priority date. I think the priority date.
That's just the application. Deadline. Yeah, that's just going to be the application. Auditions are going to be set in spring. If it's a thing where they're going to pre-screen you, they probably aren't going to start that honestly until, the winter break as well. So I would say you're fine.
And I know right now a lot of the schools are doing video auditions, and I know at FSU their date is February 1st. I think the university has a priority date if you want a decision fast, but the music audition is February 1st for that school, and it's different from school to school. And I think the moral of the story tonight is if you have specific questions about a program, reach out to the professor because they want your business. I've never seen a professor not answer a question.
That's right. Colleges want you. That's how we stay in business. That's how we keep the doors open. We want students here. So it's totally fine to ask, but I will just tell you, please make sure that you check it out online first. You try to find some information yourself. Don't just send an email and say, tell me everything. Right. So just make sure that you are speaking from a place of knowledge when you send them an email.
And if in doubt, ask your music teacher at school. Because they've all been through this process before, and they can probably help you, or they have connections, or they know people that can help you. That being said, you have Dr. Clark's email address on the screen there. I put mine in the chat a little while ago if there's anything I can do to help you. And how about thanking Doc? We'll do a applause at home for Dr. Clark. Thank you, Dr. Clark, for spending your time with us this evening. Thank you all for being here. We're going to have another session where you're actually going to get to talk to current college students in December, so from all over Florida. And then we're going to have a session in February with some of the professors at different schools for you to talk to. So be on the lookout for this. We're going to be doing these once a month. They're usually on either the second or third Monday of each month, and we'll send out that information soon. Thank you all for being here tonight. And thank you, Dr. Clark, for spending the night with us.
Hey, it was a lot of fun. And like I said, I am happy. I got my email address back up here, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. I'm happy to talk to you. And like I said, it doesn't have to be about my school. Please send me any questions you have. I'm happy to help. And thank you for your attention. And so good to talk to Florida people again. It's a lot of fun. Thank you, Dr. Antman, for the invitation.
Absolutely. And that being said, have a great night. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving break. And hopefully we'll see you all at our session in December. Good night, everybody.
Good night.